Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, dubious speculation. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Links in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, Bitcoin has extended its rally this week. We talked just a couple of days ago about where Bitcoin was with respect to the 20-week moving average. If you take a look at the natural log of the price over the 20-week SMA, and we draw a line across the page, you can see that the last time we were this extended above the 20-week was actually back in March. So it's not even the first time this year that price has been extended above the 20-week SMA this much. The time before that we were extended this far above the 20-week moving average was all the way back in October of 2021. And it's not like we've never gone above these extensions. You can see in late 2020 and early 2021, we were in more extended from the 20-week moving average, just like we were over here in 2019. So, it's not to say that it can't happen. It's just that the last time we were this extended was back in March, and before that it was back in September of 2021. And in both cases, right, in both cases where we were extended that far, while we did see a cool-off period, we did still see Bitcoin, inch just a little bit higher. You can see that happened right here in March, and then it also happened. This is sort of the extension we got in October, and then what eventually came in November. So it does show that you can get these cool-off periods, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it can't continue to go up. The other thing that I wanted to mention is these retracement tools. So we've talked a little bit about the fib retracement and where we are. We crossed through the 0.5 retracement, and we've moved up a little bit beyond it, but we're still not at the 618. The 618 is all the way up at 48K. I don't know. It's hard to say if we're going to make it there. If you look at last cycle, you can see that we made it to the 618, but they were only ever wicks, right? It was never any weekly closes above the 0.5. Currently, we're above the 0.5. We'll see if we get a weekly close above it. In order to get a weekly close above it, we need to get a weekly close above $42,000. So if we get back below 42K by the end of the week, then it might start to emulate that. If we don't, then some type of deviation from what we saw in 2019. And again, there already have been some deviations from what we saw in 2019, as this topped out in the summer, whereas what we're seeing now is taking place in December. The other way that I think is relevant to remind ourselves is that you could measure the fib retracements from the first peak over here. And if you were to do that, then we're already a lot closer to the 618, which is at around $46,000. So it really all depends on how you want to measure it, which peak you find more relevant to take a look at. I know this video is not on Bitcoin dominance, but I do want to just quickly reiterate that dominance has broken to 55%. Bitcoin is collectively outperforming the altcoin market. But again, that doesn't mean that there are not some altcoins that are outperforming. There are plenty of altcoins that are outperforming Bitcoin. There always are. There always will be in pre-halving years. It's just that, Bitcoin in and of itself has been outperforming the collective altcoin market, as dominance has now hit a new yearly high of about 55%. You can see that we went to 55% this week already. So it seems like our Bitcoin dominant journey is continuing, more or less in line with expectations that we would see dominance rally throughout the entire year. And we're almost done with the year. And I think there's a relatively decent chance that the dominance, continues to move higher over the next few weeks and potentially tops out, I don't know, maybe late this year, early next year. It could be sometime early next year around, theoretical rate cuts. But the dominance rally does still very much seem intact. And again, if you look at the retracement for there, it's almost back to the 0.5. If you sort of look at the same thing for the last cycle when dominance broke down, you can see that it ultimately topped out at the 618. And it was actually once dominance hit the 0.5, that's actually what marked a local high for Bitcoin, right? So if you were to look at where it crossed through the 0.5 right there, that's actually sort of that local high for Bitcoin. So that might be a relevant thing. But again, I will say, we can compare to all the prior cycles all we want to, but there's no guarantee it plays out like that, right? We've sort of learned that many times. throughout the years that we can compare to all the prior cycles we want to, but every cycle seems to be somewhat different. None of them are exactly the same. Again, the 2019 rally topped out in June, and here we are in December, and Bitcoin is still putting in new yearly highs. So every cycle is different. We can compare to prior cycles. It doesn't mean it's going to play out the same way. I've seen some people talk about the RSI, but just a word of caution when it comes to things like the RSI is that it can stay overbought and oversold for far longer than sometimes we think it can, right? So like right now, the weekly RSI is at 83. When it was set 70, you could have said it was overbought. And that was back when it was, back at like 36K. Now it's at 43K. It's gone up to almost 45K. And now the weekly RSI is all the way up at 82. It reminds me of like Bitcoin dominance. I mean, I've seen a lot of people this year say that dominance has topped out because the RSI is overbought. But I mean, here we are putting in new yearly highs again, and dominance is still trending higher. I mean, it's possible. I mean, at some point we'll likely form a divergence, right? The weekly RSI will put in a lower high compared to dominance, but that hasn't even necessarily happened yet. I mean, this could be a lower high on the RSI, but it also could just simply turn into a higher high. And until proven otherwise, we've just seen higher highs on Bitcoin dominance and higher highs on the weekly RSI. And you could argue that at some point we need to see a lower high and some type of divergence on the RSI as it corresponds to maybe a higher high on Bitcoin dominance. And that hasn't even happened yet. So I'm still of the opinion that Bitcoin dominance is in an uptrend, and that altcoins are bleeding back to it. Although I want to reiterate, there are plenty of altcoins that are outperforming. There always are, right? But if you look at the altcoin market with respect to Bitcoin, total 3 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin, you can see that it actually just put in a new low for this cycle. I mean, this is the lowest valuation that the altcoin market has been against Bitcoin for the entire cycle, really even going all the way back to March of 2021. So the view of alts bleeding back to Bitcoin has in fact been correct, considering that we just went down here to 39%. And remember, last cycle when Bitcoin dominance, when this metric broke down, it really started to break down quickly. And this occurred, as we've mentioned many times, right? The breakdown occurred during a Bitcoin rally, which is exactly how this breakdown has been occurring during a Bitcoin rally. So that has been playing out pretty much the exact same way that it did last cycle in terms of breaking below these prior lows on a Bitcoin rally. That seems to be playing out just like we saw last cycle, and how we've warned about many times that it could be a Bitcoin rally that breaks all Bitcoin pairs down. So, I mean, it's been one hell of a rally. We'll see just how much it has left in it. If you're curious, the 20-week SMA is all the way down at 31K. The 21-week EMA is just below 33K. I mean, that gives you an idea of how far extended we are. And again, we were that far extended back over here in March as well. I mean, if you look at this, we were about 41% above the 20-week SMA right there, and that's essentially where we are right now. So it's not even like this extension is that unheard of. We saw it right here. We also saw the same extension back over here in October. We got about 40-something% above the 20-week moving average, and I mean, the rest is history. So I just wanted to provide an update on that, given the fairly large move that we've seen with Bitcoin here over the last week. In fact, Bitcoin is up about 9.5% this week alone. So one of the things we've argued before is that Bitcoin dominance is going to go up no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD, right? Like if Bitcoin gets a correction, dominance goes higher as there's just not as much liquidity for the altcoin market. But if Bitcoin goes up, then dominance also goes higher. And every time we see a Bitcoin breakout, dominance goes up, right? And so anyone who has faded the dominance rally has been sort of on the wrong side of that, unless they picked some of the altcoins that have outperformed. And again, there are some. Congratulations if you have had one of those altcoins that has in fact outperformed. So going back over to Bitcoin, it is kind of interesting because looking at it on a weekly, we're not that far extended. But if you look at, say, like a daily time frame, and you look at like the 200-day moving average, and we look at the extension from where we are right now from the 200-day, we're about almost 50% above it. Whereas over here in March, we were about, 44% above it. So this move, has been fairly explosive, right? Fairly explosive. And it deviated from 2019 right here when it did not put in a lower low. It put in a higher low, whereas in 2019, this was in fact, this here was in fact a lower low, right? So if you look at the June low right there, and what came in September, it was a lower low, and then the rally was a lot more subdued compared to this one that we've seen today, right? This has been a much more impressive rally. Dominance has gone up, and of course the altcoin market has moved higher with it. Total 3 has moved higher with it, and you can see right now it's above the April high, but still below the August 2022 high for the altcoin market. So that, I guess, would be the next, resistance level that alts would have to break through is where it was back in August of 2022, which is not that much higher than where it is right now. But anyways, that's where we are with Bitcoin, getting fairly extended, but, history shows, especially with RSI and short-term bubble risk, right? Just because it gets to that level doesn't mean it can't stay extended for a while. At some point, we will get some form of a correction on Bitcoin. And when that time comes, I think really the telling part of where we are in the cycle will be what happens to dominance whenever that correction comes. Do alts bleed harder than Bitcoin, or does Bitcoin bleed harder than the altcoin market? Anyways, we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.